And of course, we've got to restore American leadership and moral authority in the world. And that begins by ending the war in Iraq and bringing our troops home as quickly and responsibly as possible. And here's what I have said. I have said upon taking office, I would ask the Secretary of Defense, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and my security advisors to give me a plan that would enable me to start bringing our troops home within 60 days. And the reason that I have to ask for a plan is because I don't think the administration has planned. Planning has not turned out to be their strong suit, as we have seen over the last 7 years. And in fact, I got worried about this last spring, so I wrote a letter to the Secretary of Defense, and I said, I'd like to know what you're doing in terms of planning to withdraw, because eventually we are going to come home. And they said, oh, we're not going to tell you. And eventually they gave us a hearing. I'm on the Senate Armed Services Committee, and so we got some information, but it was totally inadequate. Because, you know, when you're the president, you have to think about everything. It's such a big job. It's the hardest job in the world. So here are some of the things I'm thinking about. And a lot of smart students at this school, so, you know, if you've got other ideas, let me know. But one is, we have 100,000 civilians in Iraq, working at the embassy, working in businesses and charities. What are we going to do with them? They've got to be planned for. We have Iraqis who sided with us. What are we going to do for them? You know, in 2005, I went to Iraq with John McCain, who's a friend of mine. We went into Fallujah right after the Marines had taken Fallujah back. And we met a lot of the young Marine captains, lieutenants, and sergeants who had been responsible for taking back that city. And person after person said to me, what's going to happen to my translator? A young Marine captain said, my men and I would not have survived without our translator. He was able to keep us out of trouble. Now everybody knows he's a Marine translator. He and his family are targeted. Is America going to leave him behind? These are some of the issues that your president has to think through and reach the right conclusions. So I will approach this with great care and a great sense of responsibility. But I am committed to bringing our sons and daughters home as quickly as we possibly can. And at the same time, telling the Iraqi government they have to take responsibility for themselves. They have to begin to do what they have said they would do now for nearly 5 years. It's not easy. We know it's not easy. But the American military has done all we can do. Our men and women in uniform are the best in the world, and they have performed magnificently. But now it is up to the Iraqis to decide what kind of future they want for themselves and their children. And so, as we withdraw our troops, we will work to get the Iraqis to take the decisions they must take, and I will begin diplomatic efforts with the countries in the region, Iran, Syria, and others. I think it's important that we start trying to negotiate to figure out what, if any, kind of common ground we can find. But that's true across the world. We have to repair our relations everywhere. And I would send out distinguished Americans of both parties. We need to have an American foreign policy, not a Republican or a Democratic foreign policy again. And as we reach out to the rest of the world, we will look for ways to cooperate, to make a difference, just like we will here at home. You know, I think finding common ground is essential, and that's what I have tried to do in the Senate. You know, I teamed up with many Republicans to solve problems. You know, we found out that the National Guard and Reserves didn't have access to military health care, so I teamed up with a Republican senator from South Carolina, and we changed the law so that now they do. And I worked with, you know, across the aisle to make sure that drug companies tested drugs on, you know, to make sure they were safe for kids, because until we passed the law, there was no testing. We never knew whether the drugs would work or they wouldn't work. I teamed up with another Republican to try to move toward a national 911 system so that cell phones would be able to alert dispatchers everywhere where somebody in trouble might be. So we've worked and we've worked. And yet, at the same time, you have to be able to stand your ground against ideas that are not good for America. And I think I have learned how to do both of those. Now, I thought that I had given up being outraged at anything that President Bush or Vice President Cheney would do over the last 7 years, but a few months ago, I heard that the Pentagon was asking for soldiers who were wounded to give back their signing bonuses. The signing bonus is what many of our young volunteers are given when they sign up to serve in the military. And it's totally appropriate. But when they went off and were wounded, often in the hospitals, they were asked for the money back, being told, well, you couldn't fulfill your contract. So I teamed up with another Republican senator, and we passed through the Senate a law that will soon, I hope, be signed by the president, that will prohibit this administration from doing something that is so contrary to the values of our country.